It all started when the intercom crackled to life. I was in the middle of a history lesson, struggling to stay awake as my teacher droned on about the American Revolution. Suddenly, the voice of our principal interrupted the monotony. "Attention all students and staff," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "This is not a drill. We are in lockdown. I repeat, we are in lockdown. Please follow the protocol and remain in your classrooms with the doors locked." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as my teacher quickly moved to lock the door. The room fell silent, except for the sound of the rain tapping against the windows. For a few moments, nobody said a word. We all just sat there, frozen in fear, waiting for some kind of explanation. Then we heard it. A faint scratching sound, coming from the door. It was so quiet, I wasn't even sure if I had heard it at first. But then it happened again, a little louder this time. My teacher's face turned white as she motioned for us to huddle together, away from the door. The scratching continued, growing louder and more insistent by the second. It sounded like something was trying to claw its way through the wood. I could feel my body tensing up, ready to bolt at any moment. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the scratching stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. We all held our breath, waiting for something to happen. That's when we heard the screams. They were coming from down the hall, a blood-curdling sound that made my hair stand on end. My teacher rushed to the door, pressing her ear against it to try and hear more. "It's okay," she said, her voice shaking. "It's just a drill. Everything is going to be fine." But we all knew that wasn't true. There was something in the building with us, something that wasn't supposed to be there. And it was coming closer. We sat there, trapped in that room, for what felt like hours. Every now and then, we could hear something moving outside, a shuffling sound that sent chills down my spine. My classmates and I clung to each other, whispering prayers and trying to keep each other calm. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the intercom crackled to life again. This time, it was a different voice, the voice of the police. "Attention all students and staff," the voice said, urgent and stern. "This is the police. We are here to rescue you. Please remain calm and stay in your classrooms." There was a collective sigh of relief as we heard the sound of footsteps in the hall. My teacher rushed to the door, unlocking it and throwing it open. We were greeted by a group of heavily armed officers, their faces stern but kind. "Come on," one of them said, motioning for us to follow. "We're getting you out of here." As we were herded down the hall, I couldn't help but look around, trying to see if I could catch a glimpse of whatever had been stalking us. But there was nothing there, just empty classrooms and deserted hallways. It wasn't until we were outside, huddled under a canopy and wrapped in blankets, that we finally got an explanation. A dangerous criminal had escaped from a nearby prison and was on the loose. The police had received a tip that he was hiding in our school and had moved in to apprehend him. They had found him hiding in a closet, armed and dangerous. I couldn't believe it. All that time, we had been sitting in that room, mere feet away from a dangerous criminal. I shuddered to think of what might have happened if he had found us. As the police finished sweeping the building and securing the area, my classmates and I huddled together, shaking with a mix of fear and relief. We had made it out alive, but we would never forget the terror of those hours spent in lockdown. From that day on, I never looked at school lockdowns the same way again. I realized that the threat of danger was always present, even in places where we felt safe and secure. And I knew that I would never take my safety for granted again. I remember the day the school went on lockdown like it was yesterday. It was a typical Tuesday morning, and I was settling into my first period class when the principal's voice blared over the intercom. "Lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. Lock all doors and windows and remain quiet. Teachers, please check your rooms for any students who may be in the hallway and bring them in immediately." My heart raced as my teacher rushed to lock the door and turn off the lights. We huddled in the corner of the classroom, our breaths shallow and quick. The only sounds were our whispered prayers and the pounding of my heart in my chest. We waited in silence for what felt like hours. The minutes ticked by, each one feeling longer than the last. The only information we had came from hushed whispers among my classmates. Rumors of a gunman in the school spread like wildfire, each one more terrifying than the last. I couldn't help but imagine the worst. What if the gunman came into our classroom? What if he was one of our classmates, someone I had known for years? The fear was overwhelming. Suddenly, we heard a loud banging on the classroom door. My heart leapt into my throat as my teacher motioned for us to be quiet. We all held our breath, hoping that whoever was outside wouldn't be able to get in. The banging continued, growing louder and more insistent. My mind raced, trying to come up with a plan to defend ourselves if the door was breached. My heart felt like it was about to burst from my chest as I braced for the worst. But then, just as suddenly as it had started, the banging stopped. We sat in silence, unsure if it was safe to move or speak. It felt like an eternity before the intercom crackled to life again. All clear. The lockdown is over. Teachers, please return to normal activities. We all breathed a sigh of relief as we unlocked the door and cautiously made our way out of the classroom. As we walked to our next class, we whispered to each other, trying to piece together what had happened. It wasn't until later that we found out the truth. A former student, armed with a gun, had entered the school and was apprehended before he could do any harm. The knowledge that we had been so close to danger left me shaken for weeks. Even now, years later, the memory of that day haunts me. The fear and uncertainty we felt, the terror of not knowing if we would make it out alive, is something that will stay with me forever. And while I'm grateful that we all made it out unharmed, I can't help but wonder what could have happened if things had gone differently. I remember the day that my school went into lockdown like it was yesterday. It was a typical Wednesday, and I was sitting in my third period class, trying my best to pay attention to the history lesson. Suddenly, the loudspeaker crackled to life, and the principal's voice came through, urgent and serious. Attention all staff and students. We are now in lockdown. I repeat, this is not a drill. Lock all doors and windows. Turn off all lights and devices. Do not make any noise. We will update you as soon as we can. The teacher quickly sprang into action, securing the classroom door and pulling down the blinds on the windows. We all huddled in the back of the room, heart rates skyrocketing as we waited for more information. What was happening? Why were we in lockdown? The minutes ticked by like hours, and we could hear faint sounds in the hallways, footsteps, shuffling, muffled voices. Were they the sounds of police officers searching the building, or something much more sinister? My mind raced with possibilities. Had there been a school shooter? A dangerous intruder on the loose? What if they were already inside the building, just waiting to burst into our classroom and harm us? I tried to keep calm and quiet, but my nerves were shot. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind outside, sent my heart racing. The teacher tried to distract us with whispered stories and games, but I could see the fear and it felt like an eternity before we got any more updates. Finally, a crackling voice came through the loudspeaker again. Attention all staff and students. The lockdown has been lifted. You are free to resume normal activities. Thank you for your cooperation. We all let out a collective sigh of relief and began to move around, stretching cramped limbs and rubbing tired eyes. As we filed out of the classroom, I saw the fear and anxiety on everyone's faces. It was a shared trauma that we would never forget. But the worst was yet to come. As we made our way down the hallway, we heard a strange sound coming from one of the classrooms. It was a low, guttural growling, unlike anything I had ever heard before. I felt a chill run down my spine and turned to look at my friends, but they were just as confused and scared as I was. Slowly, we crept closer to the source of the sound. As we peered through the window, we saw something that would haunt us for the rest of our lives. In the center of the classroom was a creature, hunched over and snarling. It was like nothing I had ever seen before. Its skin was a sickly green-gray, and its eyes glowed a menacing red. It had razor-sharp claws and fangs, and it moved with an unsettling fluidity. We were frozen in terror as the creature turned to look at us. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as we locked eyes with it. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, it lunged at the window, cracking the glass with its claws. We all screamed and ran, scattering in different directions. I didn't stop until I was out of the building, panting and shaking with fear. I didn't know what that creature was, or how it had gotten into our school. But one thing was for sure, I never wanted to see it again. The school was closed for weeks after that, as the police investigated the incident and tried to figure out what had happened. Rumors circulated that it was some kind of experimental creature, created by a mad scientist in a secret lab beneath the school. But I didn't need an explanation to know that something had gone horribly wrong that day. The memory of the creature's glowing eyes and razor-sharp claws still haunts me, and I can never shake the feeling that it's still out there, lurking in the shadows. I've never been back to that school, and I don't think I ever will. But sometimes, in my darkest moments, I can still hear the growling of the creature and feel the panic of that day rushing back. It's a memory that will stay with me forever, a reminder that even the places we consider safe and familiar can be filled with horrors we never imagined.